Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. Let's start our video with a story about a person who just doesn't understand the word no. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. But I'm a single mom. So this took place several years ago. I live in a small town and came in contact with one of the players in this story today. My divorce from my first husband had just been finalized, and he'd been given X number of days to pick his things up or make arrangements for someone else to pick his things up. Otherwise, after so long, they were mine to do with what I wanted. His things were stored in a shed in my backyard, which I'd done for him as a favor after he'd lost his place. After I'd been nice enough to do that for him, things went south quickly. His now wife, then mistress, turned girlfriend, turned ex, turned to girlfriend again, had turned up pregnant, and obviously she wasn't a fan of mine and worried he would cheat. So he never got his things. I even gave him a chance to get them after the date, double-checking, being the nice guy and covering all my bases. After that, I decided to have a yard sale since I had a neighbor who wanted to buy the shed and move it. The money would help since he wasn't helping support our kids, save for feeding them 6 days per month while I fed them, sheltered and clothed them, paid their daycare and their health insurance. So I had a yard sale, sold what I could of his, plus some things I had and clothes our kids had outgrown. Afterwards, I boxed up what was left, mostly his old clothes and a few miscellaneous tools and miscellaneous stuff of little value and a somewhat crappy bent-up toolbox that was missing a door. He was a trash man and thought everything was valuable, so he was always bringing things home. I listed it for free and even offered to meet near where I worked. Remember, I'm a single mom at the time, working 55 hours per week and raising 2 kids on my own. This woman contacts me and asks if she can have the stuff. I tell her yes, but she needs to meet me at one of the few preset times and locations that work for me around my schedule. She proceeds to tell me none of those work because she can't afford to meet me where I work at, and she can't possibly pick the stuff up while she has her kiddos. She really wanted me to drive to where she was living at, 25 minutes away, one way from where I worked. But she really needs it because she's a single mom. I tell her I don't have the time in my schedule to go out of my way and spend more than a few minutes on this. She continues to try to press me on this because she needs it so badly because she's a single mom. I continue to tell her no, and then her mom joins in and tries to explain to me that her daughter really needs me to bring all the stuff to her because she's a single mom and really needs it. At this point, I tell them I don't really care. I have a very tight schedule as I'm also a single mom, and I work long hours to support my kids. The girl comes back at me that I'm only a single mom if my kid's dad is dead. The best part is when she tells me her only income is survivor's benefits on the kids, despite the fact that my only income was working exhausting long hours to support my family. And our second story. Respect the schedule, kiddo. This story took place about 2 years ago, over the span of about 2 weeks. I work in a factory on an assembly line that makes car parts, and my boss at the time was stingy about meeting quotas and people respecting the schedule down to the minute. Let's call him Mike. Now for some setup, we'd clock in at 7 a.m., work 8 hours, and clock out at 3 p.m., breaks included. We had to do some paperwork both before we started production and after we ended it. Mike was up in our faces from day one about needing to be in at least 15 minutes before our shift started so we could clear the paperwork. The bus dropped us off at 6:45 a.m. and we needed to go to the lockers to change, so that was impossible. Begin production at exactly 7 a.m. and stop 5 minutes before 3 p.m. so we'd have just enough time to finish the ending paperwork. But he, of course, had never done that paperwork himself and either didn't know or didn't care that it actually took closer to 20 minutes. Now, that paperwork was essential. If a shift didn't do it, they'd get chewed out hard by quality control, and combined with the fact that Mike was strict about the quota, 8 hours just weren't enough to do everything they wanted. It was closer to 9 hours. But I said, fine, I'll let it slide, and started coming to work with my own car so I could be early and also stay 15 to 20 minutes over to finish up. I wasn't reimbursed for gas, I wasn't paid overtime for coming in early and leaving late, but it stopped the near-daily arguments with Mike, so I relented. Fast forward about 6 months, and me and my team had a solid routine in place. Everything went smoothly. We mostly met the quota, the paperwork was always done, until one day it wasn't. One Monday morning, my car had trouble starting up, and I'd already missed the bus, so I called Mike to let him know I'd be running a bit late. I figured, hey, he noticed I try my best every day, and he'd let it slide this one time. How wrong I was. Mike was polite over the phone, but he chewed me out the moment I got in. I was 2 minutes late. I made it at 7:02. Next time you're late, don't bother coming in. I don't need lazy people working here. That was just one of the nasty things he said, but it's the one I remember most clearly because it blew me away. He used me being late to guilt trip me into working copious amounts of overtime that week, and I accepted just to appease him. I wasn't a very confrontational person, so I always took the path of least resistance in an argument, and long story short, the overtime left me so drained that I overslept on Friday and was late again. This time I made it in at 7:03. I should fire you right now for this. I already gave you a warning Monday, was the first thing he said to me when I came in. Sorry, I was just too tired. I foolishly tried to defend myself. It won't happen again. Plus, I've been coming in early and leaving late for months. Can't you cut me some slack for 3 minutes? I didn't ask you that, he answered, which was a lie since he expressly allowed us to come in 15 minutes early every day. Your shift starts exactly at 7 a.m. and ends exactly at 3 p.m., not a minute earlier or later. Got it, boss, I said, all giddy inside. The next week, I came in at exactly 7 a.m. and left at exactly 3 p.m. Production started at 7:20 and ended at 2:40 so I could do the paperwork. That, of course, affected our quota, and it didn't take Mike long to notice. We argued over that as well, obviously, but I reminded him of what he said earlier, and it actually shut him up. He tried to get me to relent and start coming in 15 minutes early and leaving 20 minutes late again, but I just laughed and said, nope, not my problem. But the story doesn't end there, because, of course, Mike tried to pull more crap with me. He tried to get me fired for this, but it didn't fly with HR. His write-ups just bounced when he sent them further up the command chain, but he noticed something that I didn't. I clocked in a few seconds after 7. We used an electronic log with individual access cards, so he passed a new rule that he planned to enforce retroactively. Only full hours are paid. If you clock in or out too late or too early, the hour gets cut. He came to confront me about that the following Monday, a few minutes after I got in. Hey, Exo, I noticed you clocked in too late every day last week, so I'll have to cut 5 hours from your payroll, he said with a smug grin. This took me aback a bit because I'd never heard of that rule before and saw others clocking in at the same time as me, so I just stared at him in shock. He clearly derived pleasure from this, thinking he finally bested me. I'd have my pay cut for my insolence. I also checked and found out you clocked in 5 seconds too late right now, he continued. So this hour will also go unpaid, I asked. Yup, he said, nearly ecstatic by that point. Awesome, I answered with a crap-eating grin. See ya at 8. I turned and left, grabbed a coffee and a sandwich, and waited in the break room. Mike came after me 10 minutes later and finally apologized, asking me to return to work. So you'll pay me this hour, I asked. No, you clocked in too late. Then I'm not obligated to work it, I said. Fine, it'll be paid. Now get back to work, he relented. And the 5 hours from last week, I demanded? Because if not, I'll leave 5 hours early today to compensate. He looked like he was ready to strangle me with his bare hands, but he accepted. I got back to work. Those hours were paid, and we returned to our normal routine of me coming in early and leaving a bit late, and Mike never bothered me for being a few minutes late ever again, though it was a rare occurrence. For the 2 years I worked under him, until he left, I still worked there, I was late maybe 3 more times, but he couldn't stand my guts and actively avoided me after that point. Labor theft is the biggest kind of theft. Don't let them get fat off your hard work. And our last story. A lawyer received 20 years of silent revenge. This began about 25 years ago. My father's friend, FF, who passed away some years ago, needed a medical operation for a non-life-threatening problem, but a life-changing one, increasing greatly his life quality. Here where we live, we have fairly good public health care, but apparently they refused to make the operation. So FF went to another country and paid for the operation there. Not much later, he decided/felt that he was mistreated by the healthcare system here and they should have performed the operation. So he went to a lawyer asking if it'd be possible. Let's call him Greedy Lawyer, GL. GL told FF he had quite a decent chance, so FF gathered all the documentation, proof, and all the stuff GL required from him. Basically, FF made all the work while GL was preparing the case. 1 month after FF gathered and submitted all the required documents, GL contacted him, explained that it was of no use even going to court because there was no case. But of course his fee had to be paid. So FF decided to do what anyone who felt scammed would do and sent GL to screw himself and not to pay. But you know what they say, don't mess with lawyers. Luckily, it wasn't too bad, just sued him and of course made him pay all the fees, including interest and court fees. Adjusting to actual money, it'd be about 7,000 euros. Here comes the interesting part. See, FF worked at an insurance company, and 5 years of going back and forward, he ended up in a relatively big company as a manager of his area in charge of, among other duties, hiring lawyers when needed from a list of recommended lawyers the firm has. And guess who one of those lawyers was? The same one who screwed him years ago. Suffice to say, FF never ever hired GL for any cases that needed a lawyer. The lack of cases made him come to the office from time to time asking if there were any cases for him. Sadly, never were. For the 20 years FF stayed at the company until his retirement. Each year, GL would have gotten 10 to 15 cases, and he worked for a fixed fee and a percentage of the money the insurance would have saved. In the end, I don't know the exact amount, but I know those 7,000 euros he got from FF cost him over the years over 5 figures, and he never knew why it happened, because as far as I know, he never recognized FF. Best revenge ever. Talk about a-hole tax. Don't be an a-hole, people. Thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.